All right, folks, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I alluded to it earlier. The aunt of Barack Obama, who he refers to in his book and has been referred to as Auntie Zitouni, has died. She died yesterday, apparently, at the age of 61. Her name was Aunt Zitouni. Aunt wasn't her name, but it was Zitouni Ayango. She was denied asylum in the United States, but stayed illegally here for years. She lived in a housing project in squalor in Massachusetts. But remember, Obama says we're our brothers and sisters' keeper, except for him. He praised her in his book, yet he really had nothing to do with her. As a matter of fact, she gave an interview a couple of years ago and praised, get this, she had words of praise for President George W. Bush for not having her immediately deported when her story came to light. Quote, he's my number one guy. President George W. Bush was her number one guy. Now, we spoke to Mark Obama, Barack Obama's half-brother, about Obama and his family and why he doesn't take care of them, the extended family. Here's what he said.
We don't just...
Once, I've heard it 70 million times from Barack Obama. We are our brother's keeper. We are our sister's keeper. Why doesn't he help his family?
Well, let's put that in context. I would step back and say, the assumption that he doesn't help his family is probably, maybe a little bit inaccurate.
Why doesn't he help? Why didn't he help Auntie Zitouni and the others who were living? She was living in a housing project in Massachusetts.
Let me share with you something, Steve. During the inauguration, the first inauguration, Barack actually flew almost all of the members of the extended Obama family to the inauguration at his own expense, and it was probably one of the most wonderful moments that we had to get together after all of the bitterness, because we're like herding cats, the Obama family. It's like putting cats in the same room and trying to move them in the same direction. It's very difficult, but he was able. We had a wonderful time. Now, that said, I cannot speak for Zitouni, and I cannot speak for, Uncle Omar. I can only speak for myself, and my book tries to do that. Now, one thing I have found out is that Barack has, in a sense, there was an interview with CNN where he said basically he met me for the first time just 2 years.
Right, that was not true.
Yeah, that floored me because, the first time we met was actually in 1988, and we'd actually met between then.
All right, so what do you attribute that to, for instance? I don't want to interrupt your storyline, but what do you attribute a crazy, being generous misstatement like that? How could he not remember that he met you prior?
Well, yeah, it was very disappointing, and I'm still waiting to hear an explanation for it.
All right, and Mark Obama went on to say that Barack Obama has run away from his Kenyan roots, from any members of his family that's related to Kenya, for political reasons and political expediency. And that's a shame. That's a shame. When you have an aunt who's living in squalor in a housing project and you do nothing. All right, folks, we're going to talk about the Mozilla CEO. Let's watch this video.
We don't just talk about the news, we talk to those making news. This is the Steve Malzberg Show.
This is a guy who, as the head of the Firefox browser, conceivably would meet Apple CEO Tim Cook. Tim Cook being the head of the most important tech company on the planet, probably. These two guys are in a room. One of them believes he has more rights than the other, and that the other guy has fewer human rights than he does. How is Tim Cook supposed to react to that? How's he supposed to deal with that? It's crazy.
Well,
an analogy would be, if this guy had donated some money to the KKK and was then meeting with a company run by a black CEO. It's beyond the pale. Once you are donating money to organizations that strip people of their civil rights, you have stepped beyond the pale.
All right, folks, there you have it. I don't know who the poor guy trying to get a word in edgewise was, but that was Jim Edwards, the deputy editor of Business Insider website, comparing someone who supported Proposition 8, a proposition which passed in the state of California, to the KKK. yesterday, Hank Aaron told USA Today that Republicans are the KKK. They just have shirt and ties. I guess you throw around that KKK analogy and it diminishes what the KKK was, how horrific they were, and what they really stood for, just like when you say Trayvon Martin is Emmett Till. But that's commonplace these days. Joining us now to hopefully add a little sanity to the insanity of it all is William Saletan. He happens to be the politics writer at Slate.com. Hello, William.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. All right, so you wrote a column that the title of it was Purge the Bigots. Brendan Ike is just the beginning. Let's oust everyone who donated to the campaign against gay marriage. I'm assuming your tongue was firmly planted in your cheek.
Yes, and I wrote it because I was quite alarmed by some of the rhetoric coming out from people who, like me, support same-sex marriage, except I felt that they were carrying things a little bit too far, as your case illustrated, where people were comparing this to, segregation, and were calling for people to lose their jobs over having supported a referendum about same-sex marriage. And I just think it's time for everybody to catch their breath, relax, and sort out some of these issues, because it's a much more complicated.
No, we lost you after you said much more complicated, but it is much more complicated than meets the eye. But I'm glad that you are a gay marriage supporter, or I am not. I believe marriage is between a man and a woman, but I'm glad people like us could come together and agree, like Andrew Sullivan agrees, that this is just outrageous. This is a witch hunt. This takes you back to the communist hearings back in the 50s. But even worse, because, if you were a communist back in the 50s, if you were, then, you should have been dealt with. But here, people have a right to believe on religious grounds or any grounds they want to that marriage should be between a man and a woman. The President of the United States believed that until a couple of years ago. So to look for people to suffer because of those beliefs is just un-American.
Yeah, I mean, there are two different questions at stake here. One is, do you support or oppose same-sex marriage? And you and I can have a conversation or a debate about that. The other question is, should we have a conversation or debate, or should I tell you or you tell me to shut up? And I think we're all better off if we continue the conversation, and if instead of telling you to shut up or trying to cost you your job, I try to persuade you that I'm right.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the way to do it. Now, in your piece, you talk about the fact that the list of people, the 35,000 people or more that gave money to the campaign for Prop 8 in 2008, you could get most of those names on the list. So you're tongue-in-cheek arguing to go after the rest of them. But I'm sure they've checked that list, and I'm sure they're looking to see who they could, in their minds, legitimately go after and have them lose their job or make an example of. So I'm sure your push, tongue-in-cheek push, is not far-fetched at all.
Yeah, no, there are certainly people who, I mean, look, going after Brendan Ike in the first place was, I think it was kind of thoughtless. People just thought, well, look, this is a guy who's part of our community, our liberal Bay Area community, and we can target him. And I don't think they thought through the criteria that they were using. And one reason why I went to the voter list, the donor list, is to point out, look, there are 35,000 people you're going to have to go after if you're going to apply this standard. They don't just work for Mozilla. They work for the Gap. They work for Google. They work for Apple. Are you going to go through all these companies and toss out all these employees? What about the 7 million people who voted for this? So it just sort of drives home, it's a reality check that you're not talking about a fringe, you're talking about a large portion of the American public.
No, absolutely. But William, I don't think, I mean, if they could go after the 7 million, they would. And if there is another high-profile CEO-type person that they could find, I'm sure we're going to hear about it very, very soon. And here's a question that needs to be addressed. I think if you took a poll and asked the American public, do you favor this kind of witch hunt or whatever you want to call it, retribution? And I'm sure 70% of Americans would say no. But, and I'm sure if you asked, was Mozilla right or wrong, most Americans would say they were wrong. Yet, the fact of the matter is, Mozilla felt the pressure. And they feel the pressure because there are full-time people who do this. They write letters, they launch a campaign, emails, etc. They say they have numbers beyond their numbers. And the American public They're not organized, and they, maybe they're reading the story, but they have no time to say, call up Mozilla on their own and say, I'm pulling it, and but if it were that way, if the silent majority, if you will, could speak and talk to Mozilla and react, Mozilla would reverse.
Well, it's not entirely clear to me that Mozilla would reverse, because you have to remember Mozilla's community is people who are fairly liberal, progressive, pro-gay rights. But what would happen? I want to ask people on the left, what would happen if we applied this rule everywhere, if we allowed pressure campaigns to drive out CEOs? What would happen at a company like Hobby Lobby? There are lots of companies in this country that have a fundamentally conservative audience, conservative constituency, conservative customer base. If they wanted to apply their community standards, all the gay CEOs, all the gay executives would be out of a job.
Well, that would be against the law in some states. I don't think there's any law protecting a guy like Ike who, and I just thought of this, I hadn't brought this up, and I've had many conversations about this in the recent days on this show. But, if you, in some places, if you fire somebody because they're gay or whatever, I guess that person could sue. But can a straight person who supports traditional marriage who's ousted, can they sue? They're not a protected class.
Well, there's a lot of debate about who gets into a protected class. It's really interesting if you read the statement from the chairwoman of Mozilla after.
Oh my God! Yeah, they're full of tolerance, right?
Well, but it's a confused tolerance,
right?
Because as we support employees of, and she has the long list: race, sex, she has sexual orientation on the list. She also has religious freedom, religious views on the list. How are you going to reconcile it when one person's religious view is that they don't accept another person's idea of marriage in relation to sexual orientation?
No, very good questions, and all these questions should be debated. Let me ask you, when Bill Maher, who I usually have no use for, and I usually quote in a negative light, and I'm just asking you your opinion on what he said. He, talking about this topic on his show on Friday, said that he believes there's a gay mafia, and that if you cross them, you will be whacked. Figuratively speaking, and in this case, whacked means you lose your job.
Yeah, I don't believe that there's a gay mafia. What I believe is that there is a universal human nature to gang up in mobs and go when you think you have power, when you think you have public opinion on your side or economic leverage. There's a tendency to use that leverage, and I think that's what's happening now. It can just as easily be used. It has been used by the right against the left. And I'm with Andrew Sullivan. I'm for a tolerant society in which we minimize that kind of behavior. And you better not use it when you have the power, because sometimes the other side will have the power against you.
Yeah. Hey, William, fascinating conversation. Thank you very much. People go read him at slate.com. That's William Saletan. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
All right, my pleasure. All right, it's heartening to hear people who are pro-gay marriage. I have no idea, why he's pro-gay marriage. That's his business. I don't know if he's gay, not gay. I don't really care. But it's good to hear people who are pro-gay marriage, like Andrew Sullivan and now like William Saletan, say, hey, this is outrageous. What are we going to do next? And make them walk in public and flog them and put them in jail and put them on an island somewhere? I mean, this is the reverse discrimination. But many in society on the left, apparently they're pretty happy with this reverse discrimination. They really don't care. Really don't care. All right, when we come back, folks, Trey Gowdy, a Republican from Tennessee, member of the House Oversight Committee. We're going to talk about Lois Lerner. Steve Malzberg Show, Newsmax Television.